2012, scientists announced the existence of this field that underlies all of creation. Properties of the field, it is entangled. There's a property of entanglement. Everything's connected to everything else, and I can talk about that more in a minute. It is holographic. That means that the whole is reflected in the part, as above, so below. It is fractal, and we talked about that in the last podcast. What physicists tell us is in the first few fractions of a nanosecond, after the primal release of energy that began this universe, what some physicists call the Big Bang. What they say is within the first fractions of a second, all the matter, the physical matter in the universe was compressed into the space about the size of a single green pea. Everything was compressed, and then the release of energy, all of that matter began to expand into the universe. It continues to expand today. The universe is still expanding. When it was in that green pea, it was connected. And even though it's no longer physically connected, it is energetically connected. We are all energetically connected to varying degrees. The heart, apparently, speaks to that field on a level beyond the linear, because we're taught that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. There was an experiment that was done in Switzerland in 1997 called the twin photon experiment. It was very interesting because what the physicists did was they took a single photon, they cut it in two because they wanted two identical photons, same properties. They used fiber optic cables, and they sent one photon 7 miles down this fiber optic cable, 7 miles, the other one down that fiber optic cable, and they're now 14 miles apart. Then the experiments begin. What they found was whatever they do to one photon, the other one acts like it's having the same experience at the same time. So here's a trick question. The trick question was, how does this photon tell this photon what's happening? So they used atomic clocks, and they said, what is the difference in time between when this photon has its experience and this one registered it? Atomic clocks. The difference in time was 0. It was simultaneous. There was no difference in time, which means this one cannot be sending its experience to this one. This is why it's a trick question. How'd the information get from here to here? It didn't, because it's already there, because it is entangled. The property of entanglement was being proven in that experiment. So this is why a woman said to me in an event once, she said, how do I get my prayer from my living room to my kids who are having a hard time? The prayer's already there. Our job is to create the prayer. We don't have to worry about navigating it, shipping it across the oceans, over the river, and through the woods, to get there. And you feel the feeling as if the prayer is already answered. And this goes a long way to helping us to understand how this field works, Andre. The field is neutral, and it can only act on what we give it to work with. So when we ask for something to happen, we ask for a prayer to be fulfilled, what you're saying to the field is, it's not fulfilled now. You're saying, please let this thing happen. What that means is it hasn't happened yet. And the field will reflect that not happening, which is very different than giving thanks for the outcome that's already occurred. Thank you for the healing that's already occurred. Thank you for the safety of my family. Thank you for a beautiful interview with Andre in his studio. That's my prayer. That was my prayer this morning. Because now you're giving the field something it can work with, and it is mirroring back what it is that we give it to work with. It's a neutral field. It doesn't know about good, bad, right, wrong. It's just going to give us back what we give it to work with. And this is a big part of where the heart comes in, because the heart, now scientifically documented in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine, is coupled to this field. They know it's coupled to this field. So this is science taking a big leap, saying, wow, there's something going on here. There's a part of our bodies that is actually tuned to communicate to the stuff our world is made of. And this is the crux of what our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions have always said. The Institute of Heart Math took this one step further. In the 1990s, there was a Russian scientist, his name was Popodan, who began studies in the former USSR, now Russia, came to the United States and completed these experiments. And what they did was they took human DNA, pristine DNA that came from umbilical tissue. So it has not been degraded by ultraviolet light and a lifetime of toxins and chemicals. Pristine human DNA. And they isolated that DNA, they put it in a suspension in a tube and put that tube inside of another tube. And they had an individual hold that tube. And a couple things are going on here. First of all, what they found was when that individual was feeling what we would call negative feelings, hate, anger, hate, jealousy, rage, fear, that DNA would actually contract. It would tighten up like a little knot. And in the presence of love and compassion, gratitude, appreciation, the DNA would actually relax so much to the point that it began to unwind as if it was going to replicate itself. Now, here's why that's important. For the DNA to express fully, it has to be relaxed. We all know that when we're in fear, we don't think well. Our certain chemicals in our body shut down while other stress chemicals kick up. We're at our best when we are in love and in joy, nurturing and compassion. This is the first time that human emotion was found to actually be able to influence, what it was that was happening. So the second part of the experiment, they took the DNA, which is the stuff we're made of, and they had a container of photons, which are what atoms are made of. Okay, so here is it's called a vacuum container full of photons. And they measure those photons. They're all over the place, just what they thought. No big deal. That's what they expected, okay? The stuff that the universe is made of. Then they take the DNA, the stuff we're made of, and they put it in with the photons. They measured it again. The DNA influenced the photons. The photons all lined up following the shape of the DNA. This is science telling us that the stuff we're made of has a direct influence on the stuff the world is made of just in nature. When we direct that through emotion and thought and feeling in our belief systems, we are actually influencing the world around us in ways that science has been reluctant to accept. But this is what our ancestors have always told us. So the bottom line, the stuff we're made of is now notice I didn't say control, I didn't say manipulate, but we have the ability to influence the stuff our world is made of, including our healing.
I just want to reflect a little bit more on these ancient technologies and civilizations that could have existed that also point to what occurred a couple 100,000 years ago. And so what do you see as a strong possibility for these ancient mother civilizations?
Earth is not what we've been told, and our past is not what we've been told, and we are more than we've been led to believe. And I think all that's being revealed right now. And I think some of the most revealing evidence is not even on Earth, it's on the moon. And the moon itself. There's a growing body of evidence that suggests that the moon is an artificial body, that it was engineered. I just did a video on this recently, an interview. One of the first things that scientists noticed is, and we all know, the moon is covered in meteorites. Big ones, small ones, overlapping ones, but they will not go below a certain depth. They're hitting something that doesn't allow them to go below a certain depth. In the 60s, and then again in the 90s, scientists did things that they weren't really supposed to do on the moon. One of those is that they sent a missile in the 90s to the moon, to a crater, a very specific crater in the moon. There's a lot of controversy around what happened. But when that missile hit, the seismic recorders picked up that the moon was ringing like a bell for hours, which is not what a solid planet would do. And the reports have been declassified through Freedom of Information. You can find them on the internet. The samples that the astronauts brought back. I had the opportunity to tour with Ed Mitchell in the 90s as well before he passed. He was the founder of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, sixth man to walk on the moon. And we did go to the moon, and he did walk on the moon. I'm not sure we went at exactly the very first time, exactly the way we said, but we definitely have been to the moon. One of the things that they found when they brought the soil samples back is that there are materials in those samples that are not formed in nature. They're artificial materials, metals that do not form in nature, and there they are in the soil. The orbit of the moon is anomalous to any other moon to its planet in our solar system, in the sense that it is offset just enough to create the tidal motion of the oceans that holds the Earth relatively stable. And there are indigenous traditions, Andre, this is fascinating, that I don't know how deep you want to go into all this, but there are writings out there before they talk about the time before the moon existed. And before the moon existed, the tides were horrendous. They were 400-foot tides that would come and wash over the land, and they do it on a rhythmic basis, and it was a very unstable environment. The moon is what stabilized that, but it can only happen. Other moons are aligned with the equators of their planets. Our moon is not aligned with our equator. It's the only one that's not. It is offset at just the right angle to stabilize the ocean. What are the odds of that happening, just by chance? The number of lunar circumferences between the Earth and the moon, there's a very specific, it's a geometric ratio of how many moons fit between the Earth and the moon and the sun. And it just goes on and on. There's so many factors that strongly suggest that the moon is engineered, and as well as the two moons of Mars, Deimos and Phobos, which are smaller and not spherical, but they also appear to be hollow and engineered. Who was around engineering moons? And how long ago could that have happened?